This story begins with Chemi, a 27-year-old woman who is going to die. Despite having a wealthy grandmother, her condition has no cure since she was born with a very weak heart. That's why she wants to make the most of her last days and travel the world. But there's just one small problem. She doesn't even have enough money to leave the village. Her grandmother gave her a job as an onion cutter, and with what she pays her, it's barely enough for her to leave the village. She can't get another job because she's known as the town disaster. They gave her that nickname because she doesn't filter what she says and is too expressive. She's blunt and very honest, who always says what she thinks. But she's not the only odd one in town, since lately some very strange things have been happening. A man went to report that 2 people disappeared, but since he's homeless, no one takes him seriously. Mr. Song also comes to the town hall, a very annoying man who goes every day to file his complaint. That's why no one wants to help him. So the supervisor orders the rookie to take care of him. Mr. Song wanted them to go shut down an illegal dump, but a very calm John tells him that they've already done everything the law requires, and since it's private property, they can't do anything else without the owner's authorization. Mr. Song is left speechless and promises to come back the next day. In the next scene, the old man approaches to talk to the young man. He tells him that 20 years ago, the exact same thing happened. People were disappearing and nobody did anything. He saw it with his own eyes, and it's happening again. After telling him that, he takes the young man's food. Later, the Church of Salvation shows up with the old man. He tells him that the end of the world is near, and that he must convert to their religion to be saved. Also, the pastor appears and shows him his superhuman abilities. For his part, Chemi tells his grandmother that he wants to travel the world, so he wants her to give him his inheritance early and give him some money. But the grandmother tells him no, that his body won't handle so much running around and that he'd better start peeling onions. Chemi doesn't want to tell his grandmother that he's dying, so he decides to take out his savings and travel at least once before he dies. When he plans to run away, his friend discovers him. He is known as the town's puppet. Curious, he asks her where she's going and with what money. She tells him that she's going with the money he's going to lend her. But Robin tells her that he has nothing because he was recently scammed again. Still, his friend tells him that she's going to leave anyway, because she has a plan to get 50 million won. At the same time, we see that Mr. Song was known as the village bug. For some reason, everything he did went wrong. Even though he had good intentions, nothing seemed to work. That's why even his daughter avoided him. Since no one wanted him around, he had no friends. So that's why he hung out with Robin. In the next scene, we see that Chemi is buying things for his big plan. But even though he was supposedly undercover, everyone recognized Chemi, since she was the disaster of the town. Also, her grandmother was very famous. Before leaving, her suitcase broke, and John saw her acting very suspicious. That's when he remembered that the old man had also disappeared. That's why he thinks that maybe Chemi has him inside his suitcase, and she bought all those things to get rid of his body. When he asks to inspect her suitcase, Chemi refuses, and she tells him not to bother her. Because of that, they end up struggling, and the suitcase breaks. Right after that, Chemi's things end up flying everywhere. She gets really angry and gives him a huge punch. Then she calls her grandmother, and she tells her to come home so she doesn't catch a cold. Her granddaughter asks her for a little money to travel just once. But her grandmother says no, that she couldn't bear for her to die far away from her. But Chemi knew she didn't have much time left, so she wanted to travel before her days were over. That's why she goes with her friends, the only 2 people who were just as desperate as she was. The puppet and the insect didn't have any money, so Chemi promises to give them 5 million won if they help her. They accept immediately, and they don't ask many questions. But it turns out they were going to fake her kidnapping, and they would ask for 50 million won as ransom, since the grandmother had a lot of money. And besides, Chemi was her only granddaughter. She wouldn't call the police, and they would get the money very easily. Or at least, that was the plan. But when it was time to record the video and ask for the ransom, Chemi's heart started to fail. She tried to ask for help, but her fragile heart couldn't take it. When the boys realized Chemi no longer had a pulse. Because of this, they got really scared and didn't know what to do. They wanted to call the police. But no one would believe that she planned her own kidnapping and that she died of natural causes. So desperate, they decided to take her to the illegal dump. They both carry her in a wheelbarrow and plan to bury her in the middle of the trash. But before they can do it, John appears. and he asks them what they're doing there in the middle of the night. They don't know what to say. And Robin, scared, pushes the wheelbarrow into the dump. Because of this, Chemi's body falls into the puddle. The boys try to explain everything, but when he sees that Chemi is dead, he obviously doesn't believe them. Suddenly, the body disappears. John thinks there must be a third accomplice, so he decides to call the police. The boys swear they're innocent and that Chemi planned everything, but obviously no one believes them. When the police arrive, Robin is stunned. His life is over, and now he's going to prison for a crime he didn't commit. But suddenly, Chemi appears, and she was completely alive. Nobody understands anything. Her grandmother was worried and asked the detective to track her phone. He told her that her phone was on Jeju Island, and then, in an instant, it was back in the village. Nobody understood what was happening. Chemi had come back from the dead, and since she was alive, there was no crime. Because of that, at the police station, the guys say that actually it was a mistake on John's part, since they went to the dump to gather evidence. Because public officials never do anything to solve it, John accepts that, and he tells the police officers that it was all a mistake. Then the guys ask Chemi what happened, since they saw that her heart stopped beating. She says that maybe she did kind of die, because she saw some really strange things. She saw a woman she couldn't understand a single word from. Anyway, Chemi was still alive. Then Mr. Song tells them to never call him again to fake a kidnapping. Suddenly, the grandmother arrives and hears everything. Because of this, Chemi gets scared and disappears. Then she shows up at an execution during the Joseon era. As for the grandmother, she was furious and knows that her granddaughter would be capable of something like that. But when she's about to scold her, Chemi hugs her and tells her that she doesn't know what's happening to her. All of a sudden, she appears in other places, and she thinks she's gone crazy. Here, we find out what's really happening. The old man who said he saw what happened 20 years ago used to work as a security guard at an orphanage where they experimented on children. One of those experiments was known as the Eternal Child, but he didn't know where it was, although he remembered a boy named John very well, since he was a child whom he saved from that fire. Now that he returned to the town, he recognized him instantly, although the child didn't recognize him. But it turns out that everything was an illusion to extract information. There was a girl who had the power to create illusions. She was part of the experiment with prodigy children. There was an orphanage above. It served as a front to take in children. And in the basement, they experimented on them. They injected all of them with a secret formula. But the survival rate was very low, and even among the survivors, very few children developed abilities. Most of them were failures. Only a few had powers. And they were the prodigy children. Among them was a boy named John. He lost his memory and was taken to the orphanage. After the intervention, he gained the power of telekinesis, and he was very powerful. Among all the children with powers, there was the Eternal Child, a boy who could not die. His body healed any wound. And when he died, his heart would start beating again. That's why everyone was looking for him. Even John, but when he sees that Chemi came back to life, he thinks she might be connected to him. In the next scene, the grandmother is surprised to see that Chemi doesn't have a single scratch. That's why she orders some tests. That's how she finds out that Chemi had completely healed. Her heart was stronger than ever, and she was completely healthy. The grandmother is happy about this miracle because now she won't have to worry about burying her granddaughter. For their part, Senior Son and Robin didn't know what to do. They were very afraid of the grandmother, and they didn't know how to face her again. Senior Son tells him that it's all their fault for coming up with such a silly plan and getting him involved. Because of this, Robin feels bad and throws a can against the wall. The strange thing is that the can destroys the wall, and for his part, was more afraid of his wife than of the grandmother, and he didn't want her to find out what he had done. But something strange was happening to him. Things suddenly started sticking to his body. The next day, the grandmother tells Chemi that now that she's recovered, she can go on her trip. She will give her the money she wants, but first she has to do some chores to keep her happy. Chemi is very happy and she promises to behave well until it's time for her trip. Later, the girl realizes that her body has improved in every way. She even looks younger and doesn't look like a zombie. But she's afraid of having side effects. Suddenly, John comes looking for her. He asks her how many times she has died. She doesn't understand his question and tells him that she's alive. John knows that she will deny everything, so he promises to get proof. Robin gets really scared, and she confesses that they didn't delete the video of her kidnapping. In fact, they were so scared that they left the camera in the greenhouse. Because of that, Chemi has to go clean up the whole mess. John follows her and wants to hurt her to see if she really has the ability to heal her body. But since there were a lot of people, he doesn't dare. Then, Chemi realizes that she's being followed and starts to run. That's how she gets to the greenhouse. But a collector had gotten there first and had the camera. John buys it and discovers that Chemi had really died. So he decides to test her powers. That's why he uses his telekinesis to crush the entire greenhouse. Being scared, Chemi uses her powers and teleports. Suddenly, she was in the middle of the ocean. Sun also went for the camera, and he saw how John used his powers to lift the debris. The boy was looking for Chemi, but her body was nowhere to be found. She didn't know how to control her powers, so she would appear and disappear without realizing it. Here we found out who was behind all of this. A rich old man freed the doctor who did the experiments. He freed him to find the eternal boy. It's the same thing John wanted to be, but he ran into Chemi and he was sure that the eternal boy was a boy, not a girl. At night, Chemi wakes up in his friend's house. He tells him everything that happened. She now knows that she's not hallucinating, that everything she saw is real. So she goes to find Mr. Sun to tell him everything she knows, but he tells them that he doesn't believe them. It's too fantastical to be true. When he tries to walk, he can't do it. His feet were stuck to the floor, and his hands to a flower pot. Well, that's how they realize that this is his ability. Mr. Sun asks them not to tell anyone, since he doesn't want to be treated like a freak. The next day, Chemi goes to John to ask him to be her teacher, since Mr. Sun told her that he controls his power very well, but the boy tells her not to bother him, even though Chemi was very stubborn, and she says she doesn't have anything better to do. Because of that, the superior sends him to investigate a complaint. Chemi alerts them, and they get on the Onion mobile to chase him. In the next scene, we see that Director Choi took his own life. He was the director of the orphanage. When the fire happened, only the doctor was arrested, since he was the one who had experimented on children. Now that he was released, he wanted to find the eternal child, because he was his most successful case. For that, he gathered the child prodigies and founded his own church. That was the perfect cover. Also, whenever the police came to investigate, the girl who creates illusions would show them an earthly paradise. The illusion was so powerful that the police couldn't hear the screams of the prisoners. At the same time, the Onion team tells John that they can take him to his destination if he agrees to talk with them in exchange. Since the bus was going to be late, the boy has no choice but to accept. Then they ask him what's going on, how he manages to control his powers, and who he really is. John tells them that he can't explain anything to them. So they want to leave him in the middle of the road so he can think about it. Suddenly, the police officers who went to the church have an accident. Apparently, one of them also had powers or something like that. His body looked like rubber. The boys try to help him, but when they see that he's melting, they get really scared. The patrol car is about to catch fire, and the boys try to move him. Robin tries to use his powers, but actually, it was John who was using them. After getting the police officer out, Mr. Sun arrives to put out the fire. But trying to act brave, he tells a lie, and he sticks to the patrol car and to Robin at the same time. The patrol car catches fire again, and this time even stronger. Because of that, they panic and don't know what to do. He asks John to use his power, and he tries to separate them, but he only manages to tear Robin's clothes. Mr. Sun gives up and says goodbye to everyone. He tells them to get to safety. Chemi feels bad and wants to help him, but her power activates and she disappears. Robin tries to save him, but Mr. Sun tells him there's no hope because the most useless person in town can't help him. This makes Robin's powers activate, and with his super strength, he manages to rip the roof off the patrol car. That's how he saves his friend. The patrol car explodes, and then Chemi arrives with a sickle. She tells her friends that they are incredible. On their way home, they realize that there must be many more like them out there. Anyone who came into contact with that mysterious liquid could have powers. The worst part is that it's random, and they could have a really good power or a really bad one, like the power the police officer has. Still, Chemi is optimistic, and he suggests forming a team to charge money for saving those police officers' lives. John tells them not to count on him, because drawing attention from other people is very dangerous, especially if they have superpowers. Still, the kids don't get discouraged. He says they just need to split the money between the three of them. But at the hospital, they realize the police haven't arrived. In fact, the hospital didn't receive any report of an accident. The police officers were taken to the Church of Salvation. This scares the kids, because it means someone else knows about their powers, and they're eliminating the evidence to hide the truth. That means if they know they have powers, they could capture them. Meanwhile, John was investigating the church, and suddenly, the pastor appears. He was one of the child prodigies, and he really hated John. When he tries to attack him, John tells him that a lot of people will get hurt if they fight. Then his superior arrives, and he asks him to go tidy up the main hall. John obeys him, but not before warning the boy not to bother him again. While he's doing his job, Chemi arrives. She tells him that someone is capturing them, so she needs him to teach her how to use her powers so she can defend herself. He tells her that it's better if they don't use their powers. That way, no one will suspect them. Chemi asks him if his power has an expiration date, or if there are any side effects. Suddenly, a classmate of John arrives to help him, and since Chemi didn't know where to hide, she teleports to another place after throwing the girl off her trail. John tells her that her power doesn't have an expiration date and that she won't die from using it. This makes her very happy because now she can live for many years. But when she leaves, the pastor from the church follows her to capture her. But before he can do anything to her, John uses his power and tells him not to mess with his student. Then he tells Chemi that he will give her a temporary job at the town hall. That way they can be together to train. When she tells her grandmother almost has a heart attack from happiness because her beloved granddaughter finally got a job on her own. When she returned home, she wanted to prepare a big feast, but the doctor from the orphanage was waiting for her. It turns out that he was good with children. That's how he won the affection of some of them. When he went to look for them, they welcomed him with open arms. Even though they were child prodigies, their powers had flaws. When they used them, there were side effects. That's why they needed to find the child of eternity. With his ability, they could find a way to heal themselves. The only one who knew where he was the grandmother. But when they question her, the grandmother reveals that the child has already died. The doctor doesn't believe her because he himself killed that child many times, and his heart always started beating again. A boy named John saw that, and he was the one who used his powers to try to save him. And that's how he caused a big fire that ended the experiment. In the next scene, we see that the grandmother had forgotten the entire interrogation. One of the girls used her powers to wipe her mind. For his part, Chemi wanted to use his powers to teleport and travel around the world, although he didn't know how to use them properly. The next day, Chemi calls his team together. Now, the three of them will be with their teacher to train. But he wasn't very convinced, to be honest, because he had never had so many students before. That day, they had a cleaning activity, and the mayor himself came to help. But he also invited the church that was controlled by the bad guys. Because of that, he decided to hide his students, using the excuse of training them so as not to raise suspicion. They believe him and decide not to go out until they learn something new about their powers. Meanwhile, the grandmother was investigating a hunch. The child prodigies had deleted all the footage from their security cameras, so there was nothing. However, the detective found a recording from the store across the street, and he showed her that Chemi disappears without a trace. The grandmother is very smart, and she realizes that something doesn't add up. That's how she discovers that it was all an illusion created by one of the girl prodigies. The grandmother didn't understand why they called that doctor who hurt them so much father. The girl tells her that he was the only one who showed them affection. The grandmother apologizes for that, and she tells her that she tried to save all the children, but she couldn't save them because they escaped. The girl doesn't believe her, and she tells her that she'd better hand over the eternal boy, because if not, she'll make her life a living hell. For his part, Chemi encourages his friends to train. Robin doesn't trust himself, and he thought he didn't deserve to have that power, but Chemi tells him that he's like a shield, that he's in charge of protecting the town and his team. This motivates him, and he starts looking for a way to activate his powers. In the next scene, we see that John went with the church group, but suddenly the pastor appears. His followers were blinded by his abilities. They genuinely believed that he was a messenger of God. That's why they were willing to give their own lives for their beliefs. The pastor controlled gravity, and he starts throwing old cars at John. He uses his powers to defend himself, but since he wanted to save the believers, it was very hard for him to concentrate. At the same time, Chemi discovers that being accelerated activates her powers. And the first place she teleports to is where John is fighting. When she sees all the chaos, she gets really scared and goes back to where she was. Later, since her teacher was in trouble, she decides to bring Robin. When they arrive, they're not much help because they still didn't know how to use their powers. Chemi tries to take them away to keep them safe, but no matter how hard she tries, her power doesn't work. Because of that, the pastor wants to finish everyone off once and for all. Robin was scared, and Chemi tells him to stop being a crybaby and do something. John tries to protect them, but in the end, the pastor turned out to be stronger, and he threw a truck at them. At that moment, Robin used his super strength and managed to survive. Chemi and the teacher were nowhere to be found. She got a wound on her neck, and that's why she teleported to the place she most wanted to visit before dying. She saw the northern lights and her heart stopped beating. For his part, the pastor wanted to finish Robin off. He said he was defective, and that there was no place for them in the new world, but no matter how much he used his power, it didn't seem to affect Robin. Apparently, his super strength made him immune to the pastor's power. Back with John, he tries to revive Chemi, but suddenly her heart starts beating again, and her neck heals by itself. After discovering all this, John ends up fainting. Then we see that one of the villains was in love with John. When they were kids, he only smiled when he was with her, and that made her very happy. In the next scene, we see Robin trying to move John, but without his super strength, it was impossible for him. When he looks at his body, it turns out he had a lot of scars. Afterwards, he goes to Mr. Sun to tell him what he discovered. This only makes him even more worried. Chemi stayed with John to interrogate him, but while he was unconscious, she discovered that he was crying for his mother, and he used his powers when he had nightmares. Chemi comforts him and realizes that he's just a boy who really misses his mother. The next day, we see that the kids were working at the town hall. Since they were afraid, being together was their best option. When they tell John that now he will be their friend whether he wants to or not, he laughs, and the girl with illusion powers sees it. That makes her feel jealous and very angry. Then John gives them a few tips. He tells them to avoid fighting with a child prodigy, and that it's better to find a way to control their powers, to avoid being discovered or scaring others. The first ones to practice are Robin and Senior Sun. When Robin tells him about the moments he used his powers, he discovers that they activate when someone hurts his feelings. Senior Sun starts insulting him, and suddenly his super strength appears. Senior Sun, on the other hand, activates his powers when he tells lies, and they deactivate when he tells the truth. Suddenly, Chemi sees a cockroach, and right after that, John sees flying fish, just like when he was a child. It turns out it was all an illusion. The girl with illusion powers was nearby, and she wanted to get rid of the three so that John would come back to them. But he was already used to her illusions, so he uses his powers to stop her. But Chemi and the others distract him, and that gives her time to escape. At night, John talks to Chemi. He tells him about the Child of Eternity. He says that he was the only successful case, since his ability allowed him to heal his body. Because he was his friend, he wanted to find him to save him, since he couldn't do it when they were kids. He also tells him that his ability is the same as that child's. Since his heart starts beating again after he dies, Chemi doesn't believe him, because she thought all those experiences were near-death experiences. Not that he had actually died and somehow come back to life. John tells her that maybe they transplanted the eternal child's heart into him. That's why he has his ability. Chemi doesn't believe him, but the young man reveals to them that his grandmother financed the experiments with the children. Because of that, he decides to go confront her. His grandmother decides to tell him the truth, and she reveals to him that his suspicions are true. She transplanted the eternal child's heart into him, but it wasn't a selfish act. It was an act of mercy, since the eternal child lost half of his head in the fire, and because of that, he wouldn't be able to recover. He would basically be left in a vegetative state. So that's why they transplanted his heart, so the child could rest in peace. Chemi was a sick girl who received that heart, but the powers didn't activate until she died. Because of that, she started researching in the library, and that's how she discovered that everything was true. That's why she wanted to apologize to John for taking her friend's heart. but she couldn't find the words or the courage to look him in the face. So she just left, and John went after her to stop her from hurting herself. The next day, Chemi was depressed, and she didn't leave Robin's house until it was night. Then she went to John's house to try to apologize, but she knew that what her grandmother did had no justification. Her teacher tells her not to worry. In the end, she's just like him. He didn't choose his powers, just like she didn't choose her heart. So she simply has to learn to live with it. Chemi promises to make the most of her second chance, although she tells her grandmother that she will leave for a while to clear her mind and try to understand her. Since she had nowhere to go, she moves into her teacher's house, and Robin moved in with them, because it's dangerous for a girl and a boy to sleep together. The next day, even Mr. Song goes to live with them. In the afternoon, they had training. Robin was getting better at controlling his powers, and he seemed to be stronger. Mr. Song would stick to anything whenever he told lies. But Chemi didn't know how to use her powers, so she decided to try another method. Since her heart was weak, she had never tried coffee before. And now that she was healthy, Robin offered her some. That made her heart race, and she started teleporting from one place to another nonstop. In less than a day, she traveled all over the world. When the effect seemed to be wearing off, Jong takes her hand, and Chemi takes him to a beach. But since she still can't control it, he doesn't appear in the same place, and she can't touch him to take him back. Because of that, she asks him to leave, and he'll return by bus. When night falls, Jong arrives home, and Chemi had prepared dinner for him. They wanted to celebrate his birthday early, since they knew he had always celebrated it alone until now. Since they are his students, they promised never to leave him alone again. Then Chemi goes to get the cake, and Jong goes with her. But when they return home, Chemi asks him to tell her about his mother. She couldn't help but feel guilty for what her grandmother did to him. But Jong tells her not to worry, because that's just how things are. Sooner or later, you use people or they use you. Then she gives him an injection in the neck. When he loses consciousness, she calls the doctor. And she tells him that she has the heart of the eternal child, and she reveals all the information she learned about her. Apparently, she was always working with them. Her training was nothing more than an excuse to learn how her abilities work. She did all that to get her file, and that way find out who she really was. But it turns out that Mr. Sun had seen them, frightened. He goes home and doesn't want to know anything else. In the next scene, we see that the pastor was using his powers to perform miracles, or at least that's what he made people believe. Because of that, he gained followers every day, and with them, a lot of money. But using his powers caused him a lot of harm. That's why they were desperate to find the eternal boy. But that day, they had caught Chemi, so they were going to take his heart. But before they can anesthetize her, she wakes up, and she doesn't understand what's happening. Since she was half asleep, she couldn't use her powers. Luckily, she had a coffee jelly bar. After eating it, her heart races and she starts teleporting. At the same time, we find out why Jong betrayed Chemi. It seems he was also experiencing side effects. The doctor promised to save him so he could live with his mother. When he opened his file, he discovered that his mother was still alive and was in Korea. But at that moment, Chemi appears and asks him for an explanation. He tells her that he had his reasons. The girl tells him to come back with her to help her, since he was the one who left the coffee bar in her pocket. But before he can answer, Chemi teleports and returns to the laboratory. There, she runs out of energy, and the doctor hits her on the head to put her to sleep. Then they tie her up and anesthetize her so she can't escape. The doctor tells her she should be happy, because with her sacrifice, she will save the lives of many people. The psychic manipulates her to make her feel bad and accept that her sacrifice is for a good cause. For his part, Senior Son arrives home and tells his family that they must leave immediately. But because of his bad record, his wife thinks he's lying or that he's been gambling again. Senior Son tells her that he's serious, but his wife doesn't believe him anymore. Because of that, he leaves feeling very resentful. That's why he leaves feeling very resentful. But because of his power, he gets stuck to the door. Meanwhile, the grandmother suspects that something very bad is happening, so she gets ready to go look for her old friend. But when she goes to visit him, she finds out that this friend was the one behind all of this. He was the one who freed the doctor, and he was looking for her granddaughter's heart. Meanwhile, Senior Son goes to see Robin. He tells her that the master betrayed them, and he handed Chemi over to the Church of Salvation. Robin is very disappointed and wants to go confront her master in person, Her son tells her that they should rather hide because he's a good-for-nothing coward. This makes Robin furious and she activates her super strength. He admits that he is a coward and maybe a bit slow. He is his only friend. At school, everyone picked on him and she was the only one who stood by his side. Thanks to that, he managed to survive school. That's why now it's his turn to save her. When he arrives at his teacher's house, the teacher tells him he doesn't know anything. But Robin doesn't beat around the bush. He tells him he'd better tell the truth willingly. Unjon uses his powers to push him away, but Robin is stronger now and almost manages to catch him. Luckily, at that moment, Senior Son calls him, and the grandmother calls Unjon. That stops the fight, and the teacher goes to visit the grandmother. She apologizes for all the harm she caused him and the other children. Unjon tells her that it doesn't matter anymore, and the grandmother asks him to please tell her where they took her granddaughter. She doesn't ask him to save her, she just wants information. Unjon tells her everything, and he tells her that it's probably already too late. Even so, the grandmother wants to try. Robin and Senior Son tell their teacher that they have to go save Chemi. Unjon feels guilty, so he decides to go save his student. The grandmother thanks him and tells him she will give him all the help he needs. Then they go to the town hall, and she asks the chief to get the plans for the Church of Salvation. He gets everything, and that's how they make their plan. For that, Senior Son's power would be very helpful. In the next scene, the doctor uses Chemi's blood to create a new formula. With it, there shouldn't be any side effects. The gifted children were confused, because they were supposed to be given the medicine to save their bodies. But the doctor tells them they have to be patient and wait for the next batch. Later, many protesters arrive at the church. The grandmother had sent them to cause a commotion and distract the villains. One and the others will infiltrate through the basement. Here, we find out that the grandmother was still in contact with some of the children. One of them was the detective, and he helped Unjon infiltrate. Then he begins his operation. Senior Son uses his powers to capture the guards without making any noise. This way, they manage to infiltrate without being discovered. But Senior Son gets too excited, and he enters a room full of guards. Meanwhile, the grandmother convinced the police not to get involved in the conflict. That way, the boys could escape with Chemi without getting hurt. The girl, for her part, realizes that the doctor didn't want to save anyone. Her heart was meant for an old millionaire who didn't want to die. Because of that, she no longer wants to sacrifice herself. She tells the doctor that there are many people who care about her, and they will be very sad if she dies. Before they start the surgery, the lights go out. Unjon and the boys arrive to rescue her. But the old man's mercenaries arrive as well. So a battle begins to get Chemi's heart. She was still half asleep. That's why she couldn't use her powers. The master and the boys use their skills to defeat the villains. When they finish with everyone, the master apologizes to Chemi, and he asks for her forgiveness with a kiss. She gets very emotional, and her heart starts racing immediately. That's how she teleports to a safe place. Unjon did that to face his brothers. He knew he couldn't fight if he had to protect her. But the girl with illusion powers already knew how to defeat him. She creates an illusion with his worst traumas and leaves him paralyzed. When the pastor tries to destroy him, Robin must use his ability to protect his master. Despite taking hits, Robin doesn't give up, and he prevents the pastor from using his powers. Then to defeat him, he activates his own and puts him to sleep with his super strength. Meanwhile, Unjon gets angry because of the illusion, and his powers go out of control. Luckily, Chemi appears, and with Robin's help, they manage. When he touches him, he tells him it's not his fault and that he should stop tormenting himself because his friend wouldn't want that. Then he uses his powers to teleport, but they don't arrive at a safe place. Instead, they end up at the Church of Salvation. Mr. Son couldn't go with them because he was stuck to the floor. Since he still doesn't have full control over his ability, he had no choice but to hide. Meanwhile, Chemi returns to the laboratory, and he discovers that the doctor injects the new formula into the old man. He tells him that if it doesn't work, his men will finish them all off. After receiving the injection, a miracle happens. The old man becomes young again. Seeing his face without wrinkles makes him very happy, but his happiness only lasts a few minutes, because the side effect makes him become even older. And as a result, he loses his life. The mercenaries had orders to finish them all. but the psychic orders them to lower their weapons and go outside to wait for further instructions. The doctor says that the experiment was not a failure, that the new formula does work. The problem was the dosage. A smaller dose should be more effective. To make more formula, they needed Chemi's blood. When he tries to escape, the pastor discovers her and almost catches her. Luckily, she used her power to hide, but she ended up in the Church of Salvation. The believers were completely brainwashed. They blindly believed that their church was the true one, and that the end of the world was near. Chemi tells them that's not the case, that the end of the world is not coming, and that it's better for them to go home to their families instead of spending their money on that church that's just using them. Suddenly, the psychic controls the minds of all the believers. She orders them to capture Chemi and the other intruders. They become like mindless zombies and try to capture her at any cost. Chemi starts to run, but just when it seemed like they had caught her, the master uses his powers to save her. He tells her that they must work together in order to escape, so they start running. But the believers were in excellent physical condition, and they didn't seem to get tired. The grandmother, for her part, couldn't get help from the authorities, so she decides to move on to Plan B. She orders her men to attack the church. For his part, Mr. Sun did what he could to hide. That's how he discovers the macabre plan of the Church of Salvation. They were planning to spread the formula throughout the whole town. That way everyone would have powers. This scares Mr. Sun a lot, because the powers were random, and his family could end up with a really bad one. For his part, Robin wanted to play the hero, but John ended up saving him, and Robin fainted from the fright. The pastor appears at that moment, and he tells him it's time to end their rivalry. Chemi takes Robin to a safe place while his teacher fights the villain. Since he was injured, it's very hard for him to defend himself. But the pastor was also weak, so it was a pretty close fight. In the end, the pastor tells him to stop fighting for them since they're supposed to be defective, meaning the prodigy children. Then both of them use their powers at the same time, and a huge explosion happens. For his part, Mr. Sun manages to reach the surface, but the believers end up discovering him. He tries to pretend to be a zombie, but the others don't believe him. In the end, Chemi arrives with a chainsaw and manages to save him. When they get to the place where their teacher was, they can't find him anywhere. Mr. Sun wanted to go home because he wanted to warn his family about the macabre plan. In the next scene, we see that the pastor lost his life. His power ended up consuming him. This makes his sister furious, and she promises to complete her plan at any cost. Then she orders her followers to go after Chemi. For her part, she sends Mr. Sun to his house. Then the grandmother arrives with the detective and many men who are going to help them. When the alarm goes off, the followers stop being controlled. Then Chemi hugs her grandmother and thanks her for saving her. Union, for his part, won the battle and went to look for the doctor, to ask him why he did those horrible things to mere children. The doctor's answer is simple and devastating. There was no special reason. He simply needed children to experiment on. None of them meant anything to him, only the child of eternity. But since he lost him, now he seeks to create more. That's why he's going to release the formula throughout the whole town. Just by statistics, at least one individual with the same ability should appear. Union tells him that more than half of the people will lose their lives. And of those who manage to survive, half will have irreversible mutations. That means he would sacrifice almost the entire town just to look for an ability that might not even appear. The doctor tells him that's a small price to pay to change history and the fate of humanity. One tells him he won't allow it, but when he tries to take out the doctor, the mercenaries had him in their sights, even though Union was now more powerful, and he manages to stop all the bullets. In fact, he turns them around and sends them back, and one of the bullets hits the doctor. Then another explosion happens. He goes to the basement to look for his master, but no matter how much he searches, he can't find him anywhere. In the end, since there were so many wounded, he decides to use his power to save the mercenaries. Meanwhile, the psychic was worried about her father. His pulse was very weak, so to save him, she injects him with the new formula she had made, but his heart didn't start beating again. Apparently, she arrived too late. Because of that, she calls her sister, and she tells her that she must complete the plan no matter what happens, so she doesn't feel bad, She doesn't tell her that their father and brother lost their lives. For his part, the old man rescued a union member. He also had powers. That's how he manages to get him out of the lab. Apparently, he didn't save him when he was a child. It was just a lie he had created to feel better about himself. But now he was able to save him. Meanwhile, the psychic uses her powers to control everyone. She even controls the detective and tries to end Chemi's grandmother's life. But she uses her power and gets her to safety. Then she comes back with a tractor to face them. In the next scene, we see that Mr. Song arrived in the village very agitated. He tells everyone that they must leave as soon as possible, because the end of the world is near. But he doesn't know how to explain himself well, and because of his background, everyone thinks he's lying, so they decide it's better to ignore him. Not even his own family believed him. That's why he goes back to Chemi's store, very scared. Then the others arrive, and the three of them are together again. They were too tired and too discouraged to keep fighting. They didn't even have the strength to try to run away. Chemi tells them they need to stop being so pathetic, and that they should get to saving the town instead. That's why they go to the festival and start looking for the truck with the formula. Even though it was a small town, when it came to looking for a truck, it seemed huge. Then the end-of-year parade begins. Mr. Song takes a detour to see his daughter. Chemi and Robin run into the teacher. He was acting very strange. The psychic was controlling him, so he uses his powers to attack them. Robin uses his own to protect Chemi. Mr. Song, for his part, believes that the church will use the fireworks to spread the formula. But before he can go stop them, cars fall from the sky. Robin's fight with the teacher was so intense that cars were flying everywhere. Mr. Song, for the first time, steps up and acts like a responsible father, so he gets his wife and daughter to safety. Meanwhile, John was too powerful. Chemi and Robin couldn't stop him. She tries to use the megaphone to break the mind control. But the teacher destroys it and tries to finish her off. Chemi uses her power and takes him far away so he won't cause any more trouble. The mind control didn't work when he was so far away, so the teacher regains control. Once he's himself again, he hugs Chemi and apologizes for hurting her. At the same time, the psychic controls all the members of the church and the believers. She wanted to use them to catch Chemi and the others. Seeing that his friends were in trouble, Mr. Song couldn't just hide, so he decides to go out and help them. His wife tells him that if he leaves them, she will divorce him. Mr. Song says goodbye to his daughter, he kisses his wife, and then goes out to fulfill his duty. The kids use their powers to stop the bad guys without hurting them too much. Mr. Song's power wasn't for fighting, so at most, he could only defend himself. But at the festival, there was a huge doll. By combining it with his powers, he makes a kind of sticky ball that traps many of the bad guys. Then Chemi teleports with the giant ball, and then she comes back with Mr. Song. Everyone watched as the outcasts of the town were superheroes who had just saved them. But their happiness doesn't last long. The psychic increases her power and controls more people. Because of that, they decide to split up. Chemi and Robin will go look for the fireworks. The teacher and Mr. Song will stop the psychic. Chemi teleports and arrives at the fireworks, but she doesn't find anything suspicious there. Mr. Song climbs onto a roof and manages to find the psychic. She tries to control his mind. But Mr. Song was immune because he never stops talking. He doesn't even keep quiet in his own mind, so the psychic can't control him. Mr. Song tells her that he's going to discipline her. But before he can do anything, the illusion girl arrives and hits him. After that, the psychic reaches her limit. She uses her powers uncontrollably and her body can't tolerate it. Since she doesn't have much strength left, she tells her sister that their father and brother died, so she must make sure to complete the mission so they can rest in peace. Her sister wanted to leave and leave everything behind, but the psychic ends up fainting. After that, people seem to return to normal. At that moment, Chemi appears and tells Unjong that it's over. When he lets his guard down, Chemi stabs him. It turns out it wasn't the real one, but the illusion girl who used that form to trick him. At the same time, the psychic wakes up, and seeing that Chemi and Unjong were kissing, gets very angry. That's why she orders one of her servants to finish her off. But after that, the real Chemi appears. That's how she realizes that she ended the life of her last sister. Unjong asks her to hold on, But the girl tells him that he doesn't need to pretend to care. Jong reveals to her that he cared for her a lot. Thanks to her, many children were able to smile in that dark laboratory. Without her, many wouldn't have survived. When the psychic sees that she has nothing left, she decides to use her last strength to bring everyone out to the street, so that everyone could receive the formula. The church had bought a hot air balloon. They would make it explode so the formula would fall like rain. Eun-jong wants to use his powers to move the balloon, but he was too injured. Chemi couldn't take all those people because there were too many. So she decides it's better to take the balloon. She tells Robin to throw them along with Mr. Sun. With his power, he could hold on and lift her to the top. But Robin tells her it's a bad idea because she could die. Chemi tells him not to worry because her heart will beat again. Jong warns her that only her heart can't die. She herself could lose her life. Even so, Chemi wants to try. Mr. Sun, who was a coward, decides to help her, because there's no other way to save his wife and daughter. To give Robin more strength, they tell him a bunch of insults. He throws them, and Mr. Sun sticks to the balloon like a spider. After helping Chemi up, he tells her he hopes she comes back safe and sound. Then Chemi focuses, but unfortunately, the balloon explodes. Luckily, she manages to teleport. The psychic sees that her plan has failed, so she faints and releases everyone. People didn't understand anything. They were just very happy about the new year. The kids were very happy because they had managed to save the town. But their happiness doesn't last long. Time passes and Chemi doesn't come back. The next day, no one remembered anything that happened the night before. Mr. Sun's wife forgot that she fell in love with her brave husband again. Although at least her daughter did remember how heroic her father was. The grandmother, for her part, was waiting for her granddaughter's return. But after several weeks, she resigned herself and decided to hold a funeral for her. Her friends were very sad. Even John stayed in the village hoping to see her again. At the time of the banquet, a homeless woman appeared at the funeral. It turned out to be Chemi. She hadn't bathed for several weeks, and everyone told her they noticed. Chemi told them that she was in a desert on the other side of the world, and since she didn't have any documents, she had to travel as a stowaway. When her powers activated, she was able to return. The whole village was very happy and celebrated Chemi's return. When John finds out, he runs home to see her. She tells him that she missed him a lot and wants to hug him, but he stops her and tells her she'd better take a bath first. She hugs him anyway, and he tells her that now they'll be together. Then they teleport. Much later, we see that the four of them had formed a new town hall team. They were no longer the weirdos of the village. Now, they were the village's super weirdos. In the final scene, we see that John went to visit his mother. Just by looking at him, she knew he was her son. When they cleaned the lab, we see that the doctor was right. With a lower dose, the body assimilated it better. His heart started beating again, and his wounds started to heal. That's how this story ends. Let me know in the comments if you think there will be a second season. Maybe the doctor has the power to be immortal. Or maybe he'll use his power for revenge. Or maybe an even crazier doctor will show up and use him as a guinea pig. Thank you so much for watching the video until the end. I hope you enjoyed the summary. Don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next story.